Quite a mix here. Different people from different stages of life and things like that. How many here are students or somehow connected with the university? Okay. Okay. Very good.
2 are professors.
Oh.
He and he.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. 3. 2. 2 or 3?
If you include me, 3.
Including you or 3? Okay, we'll include you. This topic is connected to another topic that one previous visit to the university I spoke on, and the other topic was part of a series that was meant for young people, college student age people, and so forth. The art of meditation, overcoming negative emotion. That was the topic, the previous topic, and this is one of those negative emotions, fear. It's certainly possible to cover this topic without having any reference at all to the broader topic, but I think I'll just touch on it a little bit. Negative emotion is something that we all live with. It's not embarrassment or something shaming or something like that. It's just part of having a body and a mind. There's sometimes it's warm and sometimes it's cold. Sometimes it's winter, sometimes it's summer. Sometimes you're feeling happy, sometimes you're not feeling so happy. There's a whole range of negative emotions. It's just part of life. And how to the negative comes because we don't like negative, we like positive, but it's just part of the place that we live in. The place that we live in is a place of duality, meaning wherever there's this, there's that. Whenever there's that, there's this. And think anything at all, it is the nature of the place. It's a place of duality. So we don't want the negative. So how do you deal with it when it comes? Because it comes. So that was the topic. And persons that don't handle it well, there's statistics about the chart that goes like this. The incidence of anxiety disorders, and clinical ones, and over a period of time, the rate is increasing. The level, the percentage of people, it's a very large number, and so it's of concern for people that care about people, how to deal with it. One of the times I was making this presentation was in Kunming. Kunming's a city in the western part of China, kind of southwest part of China, about 2.5 hours from Calcutta by flight. It's, one of the closest big cities in China to India. And it was a weekend, morning, afternoon session, 2 days, Saturday, Sunday. And after the morning session, we got a report. It wasn't wasn't everybody was notified, but the person who was facilitating this gathering let me know privately that in their corporation, they have a corporate job, just that day, that very day, one of the executives jumped out of the 7-story building and splattered on the sidewalk, got overcome by anxiety disorders or, negative emotions they couldn't handle, and they ended their life. And immediately, the corporation informed all of their administrator people, not that non-administrators don't have anxiety, but somehow administrators seem to have a little bit more. They immediately required mandatory some sessions on meditation, because it's known that meditation has a positive effect on the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and it has a way of diminishing, relieving, helping one handle properly negative emotions and the effect that it has on your psychophysical condition. Then we had, long discussion on that topic. So this one is a particular, what we did was at the end, the final session, we asked them, the participants, to pick out of 3. These are prominent negative emotions. Who would like to discuss this one, that one, the other one? What's their experience? And since they were all doing some type of meditation, how has meditation helped them overcome that emotion? Along with so many other topics. So this is one of them, overcoming fear. So this is part 2, or a specific emotion. And the principles involved in fear have some relevance to the other negative emotions. So here we go. And this isn't only about meditation, it's about fear and overcoming fear. Here's a little quote from FDR. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. That was a World War II slogan. And, it was popular. And it's also true because it connects with the principle of negative emotion. By contemplating the rock that hit you that hurts and the hurt, it has a way of amplifying the hurt. Well, it doesn't do anything about the rock that hit you. It doesn't resolve the hurt. It just builds. There's nothing to fear but the fear itself. It's kind of the same idea. And life has its uncertainties. We do things that, we're moving along at the path of life, and we don't exactly know what's going to happen next. We can pretend that it's okay, because life is kind of normal, but there's always the abnormal in the normal. And, who's ready for it? And then some situations are a little more risky than others. Not only uncertain, but I don't know if I would want to walk along that walkway to go out to the lake and do whatever you do in the lake. Probably a better way to go about it than that one. But life has its uncertainties. And uncertainty is one of the causes for fear. Fear of the unknown. According to the Vedic picture, does anybody here, when I say the word Veda or Vedic, anybody need a little background on what that means? We're okay. Okay. The Vedic picture of fear is that it's inherent in all living beings. According to the Vedic teaching, there's 4 propensities in all animals, and fear is the strongest of them. There's eating. Now, we don't usually see bears eating apples, but eating and sleeping and mating and defending or fearing. And the nature of these four, because as long as you have a body, these four things are things that happen, according to the Vedic picture. The strongest is fearing, meaning if you're doing any one of the other three, some danger comes, you're going to put aside the other three and take care of the danger that comes. It's a very strong impulse. They're all related. They're all related to the fact that we have bodies. According to those people that study this topic, there are three main categories of sources of fear. One is social fear, a fear of feeling judged is an example of a social fear. Fear of death. You know, some people are afraid of heights or something like that, but when some danger comes and it's death-threatening, or even there's no danger coming, it's just there may be something, the thought that there may be some. So it's a fear of death. And a third is fear of loneliness. It's such an important contributing factor, I've been told. I researched it actually. The government in the UK now, in the past 5 years, have a department under the federal government, the central national government, called a loneliness department or something like that. And the reason is, it's not just a Beatles song, you know, where are all the lonely people, where do they all come from? It's very costly and hurtful to the country. And it costs so much money that they made a department to help people that are in that space, the loneliness space. And it's a very prominent one. Here's an example. This is an example from the previous presentation. I know somebody that volunteered and got some training, and they're now part of a 1-800 suicide hotline program. And part of the training is when people call in and they're contemplating suicide, how to help them overcome that emotion. That's suicidal, that's pretty extreme fear. And often, not always, but often it's connected with something that has nothing to do with the situation they're passing through. It has to do with something they're passing through reminds them of something that's very fearful. Here's an example. Someone called in 1-800 hotline, suicide hotline. I'm thinking of committing suicide. Really, what happened? You know, what happened? My boyfriend didn't answer my phone call. And so, the trained person sat with them on the phone and went through, and it turns out they came from a broken family, and there was fear of abandonment. It was not because their boyfriend didn't answer one call. It's just connected to some trauma or a position earlier in their life. And they were just gripped with fear to the extent of thinking of suicide. Now, that's not where the path always leads, but fear can be triggered by a sense of loneliness. When you're alone, negative emotion tends to amplify, and you're feeling that feeling. So those three main sources, there's subdivisions and others, but it's according to the Vedic picture, it's increased or exacerbated by the nature of the world in which we live. According to Bhagavad Gita, by design, this is a place of dukkha. It's a place of misery. And anything that you do have that's a thing of solace or comfort, it's a shashvatam, it's temporary. And so that exacerbates the situation. The negative emotion situation. And in the Bhagavatam, padam, padam means there's calamity. Vipadam. They sound similar, but the meaning is different. Padam means step by step, and yet vipadam means calamity. So it's the nature of the place. Uncertainty, where there may be no calamity at all. Then again, there may be a calamity. And that uncertainty, that at every step it can happen, it increases, especially when we expect things to be, calamity-free or like smooth. And it's not always like that. So part of dealing with those negative emotions, and specifically the fear one, is it's part of life. It's part of the world of duality. And when we have expectations that it's not going to be the way that it is, you're inviting a negative emotion because it's not the way the world is. And some people respond with shock because they don't want this unpleasant thing to happen. Again, I've drawn this from people that study this and help people, the negative emotion helpers. It's aroused by impending danger, something evil, pain, real or perceived. There's real or imagined. That's, according to the people that deal with this, the real fear is healthy. Like, here comes a truck, and it's headed right for my bumper. It's going full speed. You have to be ready to, change direction or do something. There's a place, or here comes a bear. You're walking on a path, and I know somebody told a nice story about this. She and her mother were walking on a trail, and they saw a moose running past the path, going crossways. And they thought, wow, he's really, really running fast. Mm-hmm. And then they heard some noise coming after the bear, or after the moose, and it was the bear. And they panicked. And they did what you're not supposed to do when you see a bear. In case you didn't know, if you see a bear, don't run. You don't run, because the bear stopped chasing the moose and started chasing them. And the bear was faster than they were. And the bear was running faster and faster, and they were running faster and faster, but the bear was catching up. So they did, or the mother of the daughter did what you're supposed to do. You raise your arms and make yourself real big. Look, because their eyes are bad. But you make yourself look really big. And something else she did, you can do this, make yourself look big, but she screamed. She screamed, in the name of Jesus, save me. The daughter was telling the story. And the bear stopped and then started chasing the moose again. So the real fear is healthy, but you have to know how to deal with that which is provoking the fear. Imagined fear is toxic. It's unproductive. It doesn't help anything. You may need to protect your body for some circumstance, like a bear is coming. But an unhealthy fear takes away intelligence. It takes away discrimination. It makes things that are small look really big, and things that are normal size look oversized. And then your performance becomes diminished. So, in principle, this is a Vedic principle. Wherever there's desire of any kind, there must be an accompanying fear or anxiety. Like, you want something, And, who doesn't want something? We're living entities that want something. And when you want something, there's the uncertainty of getting it. And then when you get it, how long is it going to last? Because it's temporary. Dukkhalayam shashvatam. I won't get it. Or I do get it, and it can be taken from me. And ultimately, everything is going to be taken from us. That's reality. We're all going to leave this world and take nothing with us. That's the reality. So, and in the times that we're living, gosh, with this variant number 2 or 3, whatever it is, and the increasing incidence of COVID infection, I mean, who would, if someone had said to you, 1 year ago, we're going to be sitting in this living room all wearing masks, like, come on. But, we're wearing masks. And it's not like fear, it's just a precaution. But, what's next and what's next and what's next? People with their jobs, with, all kinds of things impacting the lives of people. Where there's uncertainty, the door for fear is open. That doesn't have to be fear, it can be adventure. And, flexibility and all kinds of things. I like this image because it's like the young boy walking into who knows what he's walking into. And that on the backpack is the face. And a face is, like the face of uncertainty. Fear of personal loss. Here's part of what we're going to be doing. I have 2 ideas. One of them is built into this. It's a participation exercise where you think about something and then share it with somebody nearby. That's part of the exercise. One of my deepest fears. And what do I have now that I feel I might lose? And will I lose it in any case, in course of time? We had something like this the other day with Bhagavad Gita values. It was 2 interactive sessions. Feedback was people liked it. It was meaningful because it wasn't just lecture like you do at the university. It's interactive. So if you're okay with this, we'll spend 4 or 5 minutes. Think about some fears, things that you might lose, and the reality that in course of time it's going to be gone anyways. And coming to that recognition, how does that impact any fear of loss? And how you're going to realign or readjust yourself according to the temporary nature of all things and the fear of loss of things that are important to you. Is it clear? Think about it. And when you're ready, turn to somebody nearby. And groups of 3 also works. And you got a few minutes to discuss. Practical application. Fear of personal loss. You can speak loud enough. You don't have to whisper.
Okay, you can connect your team. Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
But I guess
What are my
time.
Here is always
Many years ago.
here is something very
Think about it.
hard to my body. It's very
think about them, but not
accident or because of
feel so sad.
we wouldn't be
Fast.
I don't have to
So that is always
I mean very clear up there.
yes, time. Other things happen. Come. Brain loses, but still it's hardwired. The brain it's always there, but the pain is ignored in us. Pain is always there. Yeah, that is also otherwise. I can lose that. That is always biggest thing. Yes. I can try. That's not. But you know, yeah. Something yeah. Move on, but anxious. Because sometimes what happens, there's another something else.
Yeah. So what is the next?
I didn't think too much about this before, but now the topic is very, I make a big mistake of somebody else. Somebody else has to suffer because of my pain. For now, this seems to be like,
I will lose my
I don't know what the background was. Why did you lose it? Was this part of the pain? So you mean you're mistake, you're driving, you hit something and somebody gets hurt. You lose it. If someone loves me, I love you, they will not.
Yeah, but this is the fear. Accepting the better. But this is
That's what I was thinking. Why? If your parents or somebody you have to be I cannot recall any event.
One more minute, we'll finish up.
It's every you know, you are hoping very good I know what they do first thing. But I
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, but I think we need
Hare Krishna.
meaning or something in there. Otherwise, that does not advantage. So we will not. Yeah.
This interactive session is very popular.
Yeah.
Keeps everybody alert and alive. From my experience in visiting colleges, this next one is what they, if I give a list of things, this is one of the ones that gets selected. Top of the list. Fear of being judged. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, on the one hand, there's a tendency, statistically, amongst millennials towards narcissism, a tendency towards doing something externally that shows my uniqueness and to draw attention. And on the other hand, there's a fear of being judged. So part of it is the counteracting that fear, but it's a fear. At least that's what's reported from many people. One of the best ways to address the fear of being judged is don't judge. Because you judge and it comes back to you. That's just a law of nature. Some of you may be familiar with this very talented and gifted speaker, Brené Brown. Someone sent it to me, a TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability. You can note it down and you look it up, and it's a 20-minute thing. And it's very powerful. She's a researcher, statistician by profession, but she's also a very good speaker. And she's not a Hare Krishna devotee, but she's a person that understands human nature. And the conclusion of this first TED Talk, that is, there's part 2, but part 1, the conclusion of it is feeling self-worth, or in her words, I'm good enough. And the study that she conducted was people that are wholesome. That was her term, the wholesome. And then there are people that aren't, and they have all these negative emotions, such as fear, that rule their lives. But then there are people that are just fine, and they're very balanced persons, and it's by the self analysis that I'm enough. I don't need to judge. I don't need to worry about people judging me. It's just self-awareness of their shortcomings and their strengths, etc., etc. But it's a place that makes them, in one sense, vulnerable. They can have relationships that may not work out, or they can make efforts and projects and things that may not work out. But that's okay, because at least her conclusion is that after many years of study on the topic, there's a sense of self-worth, or I'm enough is her phrase. Then there's a spiritual conception, taking her message and spiritualizing. I know some people that there's kind of a theme that surfaces again and again in their life. It goes away and then it comes back, and then it goes away and comes back. But it's the I'm not good enough feeling, no matter what. However, whatever. It's so. I've long before hearing Brené Brown's talk, my conversations with them had to do with, what? There's some intrinsic self-worth, and the self-worth is simply, as this on the spiritual conception, that you're part of the Supreme Person. And because you're part of the Supreme Person, there's some inherent self-worth. Whatever the packaging is or isn't, and it may change and come and go, and all the temporary, there's an intrinsic self-worth. That's based on a spiritual conception. Now, that's having some beneficial sense of uncertainty, dealing with uncertainty. But then there's the toxic one. And one gets into this other mood of fight or flight. And it's built into the nervous system. It's the parasympathetic nervous system. It just kicks in, and people feel threatened, and they don't have to think about it. They're just in a fight or flight mode. I can think of some examples. Going a little deeper, based upon, now this is a Srimad Bhagavatam message. You see on the left side is someone heading towards the light, and on the right side is heading towards darkness, and even there's someone carrying a death saber over their shoulder, so it means there's life and there's death. And in between, is where we're going. So, a misconstrued sense of self-worth or self-identity is false ego, ahankar, false ego. And absorption in that misconception of self gives rise to fear. There's the Sanskrit of the verse. Bhayam is the Sanskrit word for fear. And syat means arises. So fear arises. The sandwich in the middle is abhinivesh, is absorption in dvitiyam. Dvitiya means duality. The misconception of self with that which we're not, false ego. And having a clear conception of who I am that's not really who I am. And when we have a misconception of who we are that's not really who we are, it gives rise to fear, because it's not really who we are. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Supreme. There's a second half of that same verse which gives this remedy. When that same living entity turns away from the Supreme Lord, he forgets who he is, he forgets the Supreme Lord, and this is carried out by the deluding potency Maya. So the remedy is association with those that don't have that fixation in duality. Associating with self-realized persons, or in the Sanskrit term is sadhu sangha. But when one was passing through that situation, there's the negative anxiety or fear or uncertainty. And the Vedas teach us how to transition. Bhagavad Gita teaches us how to transition beyond misconception of self to a proper conception of self, or transitioning beyond fear to a state of actual fearlessness. Not that the temporary will become permanent, but the fear that the temporary is going to be temporary. And I'll lose everything, or whatever it is that one has a fear of. This is a graphic that I like, or an image that I like. I use that a lot. It's indicating where we are on the left side and where we want to be on the right side, and there's a big gap. And to get from where we are to where we want to be, that's called liminal space, or, in between this and that. That's what a limin is, in between where you are and where you want to be, or being outside and inside. There's a in-between space, like a veranda or a porch or whatever. You're neither inside nor outside. So it's spiritual life, or moving from the fears that are connected to false ego and misidentification with who we're not, and then losing it. And invariably it's lost. Time takes away everything. How to move from who we aren't to who we are, or become self-realized. There's a nice verse in Bhagavad Gita that's speaking of the position of self-realization. It's called Brahmabhuta. Maybe some of you know the Bhagavad Gita verse. That's how it starts, Brahmabhuta. And then there's 3 stages. So that's Brahmabhuta means you know who you are. That means you've let go of the misconception of who you thought you were, but now you have a spiritual conception of who you are. Brahmabhuta. The 3 symptoms are a happiness within, a contentment within. It gives strength and stability and ballast in life. Second one, neither hankering or lamenting. You deal with what's coming your way. You have a plan of life and you're working on that plan of your life, but you're not hankering or lamenting on the material side. You're dealing with, but not hankering or lamenting on the material side. And the third symptom is to see all living entities equally. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu. And that's the platform of pure consciousness. So that's a nice destination on the right side, and there's this big space in between. And that space in between is a spiritual practice that deals with letting go of that source of the fear and accepting the reality that's not temporary and not limited. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us that this bridge moving between where we are to where we want to go this means linking with the Supreme. This idea is written about by different people. This is a sociologist, author, Katie Miller. There's the cover of her book. And the title of her book is How to Surrender to the In-Between. And one of the phrases from the book is finding comfort in the not knowing. It's kind of like being a teenager. There's a few teenagers in the room. So in between means there's dependent and there's independent. And then there's the in-between. And it's a little uncomfortable being in that in-between space, everybody knows. And her whole book, it's a sociology book, is finding comfort in the not knowing. And the not knowing has something to do with, at least you know where you're going. I mean, you have an idea where you're going. And if the idea that you're going is a permanent idea, self-realization or knowing the eternal self within, then it's okay to be in that in-between space. Being in a threshold of life is really about trying to give over our trust to the power of time. That's another phrase from her book. I like it. Time is one of the 5 important topics of Bhagavad Gita, primary topics of Bhagavad Gita. And time changes things. It just has a way of changing things. Time moves matter. Time brings about creation and destruction. Time, it's not just a notion. According to the Vedic conception, it's a Shakti, it's a power. Time is a Kala Shakti. The power of time moves. And giving over your trust, because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, time I am. Kalosmi, asmi, kala, asmi, I am time. The destroyer of all things. That's from Bhagavad Gita. I don't know if it's true, but I read it many times, that one of the men, Mr. Oppenheimer, who designed the atomic bomb, when he saw the Hiroshima bomb go up, he quoted this verse from Bhagavad Gita. Time I am, the destroyer of all things. So, anyway, the power of time is something we can't change. And you give yourself over to that power of time, and you're ready to move into whatever the next thing is, from where you were to where you want to go. It's important to know where you want to go. It's important to have a guidance, higher consciousness type of guidance of where is a good place to go, as opposed to an unwholesome place to go. And it's a nice book, a sociology book. So my point is, it's not just spiritual people that talk about this. It's sociology people. Here's another one: honor the space between no longer and not yet. Same idea. Modern people are writing about this concept. And then the spiritual application of this concept is the place of spiritual joy. And there can be spiritual joy in the midst of where there's duality, dvitiya, and uncertainty. I like this image. It's like a barren street somewhere, and somehow there's this nice pansy growing in the crack in the sidewalk. Maybe somebody just stuck it there or something, but there's joy even in the most barren of circumstances. Some of you may know the author, let me think of his name, Viktor Frankl. Any of you heard his name before? Viktor Frankl, Frankl. He wrote a book that's a very popular book, and it was published in 1946, which was right after World War II was over. He was a Jewish man in a concentration camp, and he survived. In fact, his profession was as a psychiatrist. And he survived, in his own words, because he was invested in a mission that was meant for him. The mission that he understood was meant for him is to help people overcome negative emotions. When they're dealing with something that there's nothing you can do about, like being in a concentration camp, nothing he could do about it. He survived. He gives some details of some things that happened so he could survive. But it was on the strength of, it was a power that was invested into him by God, by the Supreme, to be able to endure that situation and be able to help people on the other side of that experience to deal with their negative emotions when there's nothing you can do about the situation. There are some situations, there are some things you can do, and sometimes there's things you can't do. Nothing you can do about it. And so, there's a sense of purpose. He speaks about a sense of purpose. And for him, it gave him a strength, a contentment. Or, in the language of Bhagavad Gita, here's the verse, I mentioned it already, Brahmabhuta, that's the stage of happiness within. Prasannatma, prasanna means happiness, and Atma means the self, happiness within. Na sochati, na kangsati, neither hankering or lamenting. Here's a statement by one of our great Acharyas. There's just 2 slides. This is the next to the last one. Fear, lamentation, and delusion shadow every step. The only way to become free from the clutches of these 3 plunderers is to engage in devotional service to Sri Krishna. That's a yoga teaching, a bhakti yoga teaching. By connecting with the Supreme, you can overcome those. You become free from those, he calls them plunderers, because they take away life energy and, and happiness, etc. And the last slide, this has to do with this mantra meditation topic, is there's the mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. And the image on the left is a lady going through a similar, like that young boy with the backpack on his back, into a world of uncertainty. And that's kind of every one of us. We have some idea, certainly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. But there's uncertainty even where we think there's some certainty. We don't know. We don't know. And we can be, oblivious to the fact that we don't know and just keep going on merrily as if we know. And then something unexpected happens and then we feel some negative emotion and we're dealing with that negative emotion thing. So the summary is be accepting of the uncertainty. In fact, willingly, it's adventure. Life is an adventure, and be very clear what the higher mission of the human form of life is. Over on this side is birth, and over on that side is death, and in between is life. And what goes into that space? What's the purpose? What's the mission of this human life? And the permanent mission, the long-term mission, and there's steps towards that long-term mission, is to know yourself. And that means letting go of the misconceptions, the false ego conceptions of who I think I am, and it's instead of who I really am, and the eternal sense of who we really are. So we do stuff and deal with stuff in a responsible and the best way that we can, while not forgetting that ultimate mission of life, knowing who you are, being connected to the Supreme as you're moving along that path. And according to what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who takes that path, they'll come to me. It's breaking the cycle of birth and death while dealing with the temporary, using our temporary faculties, intelligence, mind, body, wealth, and, everything, engaging with the temporary towards the eternal. Okay, so that's some thoughts on the topic. Let's see if there's some discussion from the people who are attending here. We have a little microphone if you want to say something.
Thank you, Prabhu. It was great. I was talking to
Kripamoya.
these two
Yeah.
gentlemen about. So, sometime when you lose somebody who's very dear to you,
Yeah,
that's very hard.
it happens.
How do you deal with that? Thank you.
There's several things. There's principles, and the application of principles depends upon the details. But the principle of grieving is a natural human function. And there's this saying, time heals all things. So while we're passing through that feeling of loss of someone dear to you, you don't run away from those feelings. You don't jump into those feelings, but you don't run away from them. And you think of the meaningfulness that person had in your life. And one of the things we're going to be speaking about in 2 weekends from now is expressing for those that are around you that are still around, your feelings of appreciation and your gratitude to them for what they mean to you in your life. Because we don't always do that. We often become kind of like just take it for granted. So the second thing, the first thing is just go through the natural process of grieving, learn from those who have been through it, share with those that have been through it, so because it helps you go through it. Like, for example, mothers that had miscarriage. It's a good idea for a mother who has a miscarriage to connect with someone that's already been through that, and they can share their experience, their heart, their feelings, etc. So don't cut yourself off. Stay in association of those that understand. And, the grieving process, there are persons that are gifted. I know some people that are gifted in this area, and they, it's good, reach out to them. So that's one. Another is learn, because one of the things that happens in the grieving period is regret. That I didn't express my heart, I didn't do enough for them and all those things. And it's too late because they're gone. So learn from that experience and invest. This is a really important item. Invest in those things that are meaningful to relationships, the ones that are still accessible, and make them more rich and full and meaningful. The third is read wisdom literature, because wisdom literature will help you understand how to move towards the eternal in the course of loss of something that's temporary. Wisdom literature from any background is filled with that. So that's another way of saying what I just said is yoga. You connect with the Supreme, because wisdom literature that's really wisdom literature is from the Supreme. You make that connection with the Supreme that teaches you how to deal with the temporary and the loss of the temporary, and interacting with the temporary in a responsible way going forward in time, instead of taking it for granted. The temporary is going to be here forever when in fact it's not. And when it's gone, that's a feeling, there's a loss. So move towards the eternal, in short, and acknowledge the limitations of all things that are temporary. It doesn't mean become cold or insensitive or something, but be connected to reality while moving through the temporary. A final one is, there is something about this person that you have lost that you understand was meaningful to them, and invest in that which is meaningful to them. You follow? Srila Prabhupada wrote this about Mahatma Gandhi. He was requested to be a keynote speaker at his memorial service, because when he was a younger man, he was a Gandhi follower. So he spoke, but he made a whole paper on how to honor a great person. And he said what not to do is name a street or a building or something after the person and have a statue somewhere in a park and for a great person. Better is you establish a kind of interaction or sangha or a village, a way of life where the values held by that great person become manifest in this world. Dedicate yourself to that. The meaningfulness of that person who's no longer with you, make their values manifest in the world as best you can. It's giving positive energy to the person. And the values that they hold, that's an essential part of any person. So invest in that. And then you feel the connection with the person because you're connected to the values of that person. Whatever that might mean. It doesn't have to be all-consuming of one's life. It can be. Depends on the person and their values. That's a short. It's just a gradual process. Long as there are persons who are very gifted at guiding people who have gone through loss, and connecting with some of those people. Especially where their values are similar to your values. That's a good thing to do.
Do you have any lecture or something? Yeah. That I can watch on YouTube or something?
I can recommend somebody that I know that is really gifted at this. And Rambaru, you give him. There's a lady named Rambaru. That's her devotee name. Brinkman is she married a German man, so Brinkman was her legal name, and she formed an organization, a not-for-profit organization called Karuna Care, and she speaks, and she's very affective and effective. So she has lectures on this. Rambaru. You have her contact information? Okay. Can you supply to him and he can make it available? From her? Connected with her? Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
Very nice, stimulating lecture. I really very enjoyed your lecture.
Practical.
And very practical. And also, I had same question Puneet asked already. So very nicely, I enjoyed your answer. And I have just a slightly different question. So what happens after death? So soul basically travels very fast from here to India in 1 minute, 2 minutes. So what happens after death? So,
What happens after death?
yeah.
Okay.
It's a different topic, but I just curious to know. What your
Okay.
thought.
It's not my thoughts. It's what Bhagavad Gita says. I can say what Bhagavad Gita says, and the Bhagavatam combined. So 2 things. One is, before the soul leaves the body, the next destination is already determined. Say it negatively. If the body becomes unfit to inhabit, but the next destination has yet to be determined, it's called coma. A comatose condition is, clinically the body is kaput, but the soul is still present. So that person may remain in a coma for a long time, and then may come back out of the coma or may move on. So the point, in response to your question, when the soul leaves the body, the transfer to the next situation is immediate. And the next situation is already determined. And the determining factors are primarily guna and karma. What the mind is absorbed in and their past activity. It's going to determine the next destination. Guna and karma. And then where, from Bhagavad Gita, if one's mind and contemplations are in higher modes of nature, sattva guna, right, mode of goodness, one goes up. Udvam gachanti sattvasta. Sattvasta. If one is situated in goodness, urdvam, one goes up. Madhye tishtanti rajasa. If one is in the mixed mode of passion, then one stays in this region. some form of life in this region. And then adho gachanti, adho, down, tamasa. So the destination depends upon where your consciousness is. And if one is in elevated consciousness, but one has not yet achieved the culmination or perfection of consciousness, then that destination is known. There's three options. And if it's not, it's unknown. When destination is according, what species of life you're going to end up in and all those things, it's not known. But for higher consciousness, there's three options. Going to the heavenly planet, staying for some duration of time, coming back again to this earthly realm, and taking birth in the earthly realm. Because that is, some piety is accrued and you enjoy the fruit of that piety. When that piety account is depleted, back again. That's one option. The two other options are, according to Bhagavad Gita, one can take birth in a wealthy and aristocratic family, so there's no material wants. And in that situation, there's an opportunity to go further. You're not just struggling. And then the third option is ideal, and that is, if you're taking birth again, take birth in a family of devotees, or those that are, the value in that life is not just wealth, but spiritual practice. So taking birth in a family, such a family, that's a third option. And if that elevation of consciousness has not been a significant part of one's life, then the destination is unknown. If there's been some svalpa, alpa means little bit. A little bit of spiritual practice, guaranteed at least a human form, not going down to lower forms. Those are all teachings in Bhagavad Gita. Does that address your question?
Yeah, no, that's very good answer. I understand that. Also, sometimes people say that the soul actually after the
Microphone, please, for people remote.
Okay, the soul actually travels very fast. Once soul leaves the body, it travels very fast.
Immediately.
Yeah. So how does it work actually? That's scientifically.
How what?
How does it move so fast? Like.
Oh, why? What's the problem? How fast does the mind go? That's
Yeah.
fast. That's fast, and that's the medium that carries the soul, is the subtle body. The gross body doesn't go; the subtle body goes.
And it can be existent at all the. So now
It's
here
subtle.
can be like India or something.
Yeah, just say you're sitting here. Supposing you're sitting here and you have some relatives somewhere in India, and you think of your relatives. How long did it take for you to get to your relatives?
Very fast.
That's how fast the mind goes.
So,
And it's the subtle body that carries the soul to the next situation. It's really fast, lightning fast.
no, so mind is basically working through the memory. So I remember something.
It's not just memory. That's part of the function. But it's, thinking, feeling, and willing are functions of the mind. And the mind is one of the subtle elements of the subtle body, and the mind carries the soul to the next situation. I mean, here we are. We're sitting in his living room. Before we were here, the mind got the idea, hey, let's go there. And here we are. The legs brought us, or a car brought us, or whatever, but it's the mind. And then, we're thinking what's the next, and your mind will... So the mind is part of the machine. And it's very subtle. So when the gross machine is kaput, finished, the mind goes. No reservation, nothing to slow it down. So whatever the mind, this is another verse from Bhagavad Gita. Smaran means remember, right? Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Whenever the mind is, the bhava or the emotion, the mind is contemplating at that moment of death, tyajat ante. Ante means end. At the end of life, whatever the mind is contemplating, that's where you go.
Thank you. And my last question actually, that when soul leaves the body, suppose.
For online people, hold the microphone
Okay.
like this.
So my last question is basically when soul leaves the body, say somebody is losing the parent. So do you think once the soul is left, do you think that parent cannot recognize the children after the?
I mean, that there's general and there's exception. And the general is yes, and the exception is something can be known because somebody has subtle perceptions. Some people have that. There's some people see things that other people can't see. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm still talking for other side. The soul, suppose say I lost one of the parent.
Yeah.
So that soul can still recognize me as a son.
Oh, no. No. I mean, again, there's general and there's exception. The general is no. The exception is there may be, but it's exceptional.
Okay, but there's a connection. That soul.
Oh,
connection.
yeah. But the connection's a karmic one.
Okay.
It's not a physical, tangible one. It's a karmic one. And so, although some relative has gone away, karmically you can do things that benefit that soul that's gone away. And that's part of the question here. You become spiritually elevated, and that spiritual benefit that you have received automatically goes to that departed
So
person who's dear to you. It's just a law of nature. You can pray for that, but it's going to happen anyways, because of the karmic connection.
okay.
As a family member, or just because you hold someone dear to you, non-karmic, just you have affection for someone,
Okay.
and you pray for them, and you become spiritually elevated, then benefit is going to go to that soul.
Yeah. And most of the times the soul doesn't recognize me.
It's the third time you've asked the same question, and the answer is generally no. But there can be an exception.
Thank you.
Okay, up front here. Up front.
First of all, please accept my humble obeisances to you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. After a long time, I'm seeing you. That question, what about the discussion we all gone through? The topic is the fear.
Yeah.
So somehow or other, it is always fallen upon us in the different direction. But my question is that how we can develop the fear in the prominent way, or it will be like a developed ourselves to deep faith that we can overcome and our life will be successful. Only the chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, that's for the devotee, but what will we think about the Kurmi?
Let me say back what I think you're asking. What can, other than that a devotee, what can we recommend to someone who's not a devotee to overcome fear?
Yeah.
That's your question.
Yeah, and it will be like a good destination or
Okay, Urdhvam.
yeah, just you mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah. Well, there's degrees or stages or layers or something. And, directionally upward means turning, looking to God. And there's different people that have different conception of what God is. All kinds of different ideas of what God is. But in principle, looking towards God, then there's this sense of eternal as opposed to the temporary and the loss of the temporary, and the fear of the loss of the temporary. There's this the higher consciousness people are not interested in becoming numb to loss of the temporary. They're acknowledging the temporary is going to come and go. So it's being situated in knowledge is something that helps elevate. If you don't have knowledge, you're in ignorance, and that's way down here.
Yeah.
Then you're like just an animal, no knowledge. But if this persons have knowledge, especially knowledge of that which is eternal, like the soul is eternal, and when you're in the spiritual conception of who I am, then it diminishes fear. Because you know the temporary is temporary.
Yeah, temporary.
And I may have some attachment for the temporary, I may have some feelings towards that which I have attached to, that's temporary. But I'm lifted up by this knowledge of that which is eternal. Now some people have a sense of that which is eternal without a sense of God. There are some people like that. Anyway, so the higher that one goes towards truth, sattva,
Yeah.
and Brahman, Brahma Tattva,
Brahma
the
Tattva.
truth of Brahman,
Yeah.
then Supreme Brahman, and one's relationship with the Supreme Brahman, and acting, and so the further and further and further, then that fear shrinks. It doesn't mean you feel loss when there's a loss. But you go upwards because you know that there's something eternal.
Yeah.
Like, that person who I feel some attachment to, I know that they lived their life in a wholesome way, and so they're in a better place today than they were yesterday. And I feel good for them. Because they're in a better place today than they were yesterday. I feel good about that. Now, there's still a sense of loss.
Yeah.
Doesn't take the loss, but I feel good for them. No. The more one's thoughts go to that which is eternal, it diminishes fear.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, back to that verse, Bhayam Datriyam Abhinivesh Taksyat.
Yeah.
When there's absorption, abhinivesh, there's absorption in only the duality. It covers your sense of what's eternal and your relationship with the Supreme, and you get spun out. Your discrimination goes out to lunch, and you're just swimming around in emotion with no light, no guidance, no direction. So, go for the eternal.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Someone else.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So we talked about three types of fears. Three types, right?
Yeah, I'm
so
with you.
one of the one is the fear of loneliness. So I was just seeing myself foreseeing in future. Eventually, that type of fear is already started to come in myself. Like last. It started maybe 1 year. I started to feel that fear of loneliness. I don't know why, but that is there. So how do I? And I'm thinking of the reality. How that I'll be in that situation eventually later on, but this is bothering right now too much on me. I couldn't able to take it out. So. I know.
Okay, it's fine that you're asking this question. You're just being honest, and you're, spiritual. In a few words, spiritual elevation. That is, strengthen your connection with that which is eternal. For you, it's your Krishna connection, because that's eternal. And that you can begin immediately. You don't have to, wait till circumstances bring you to the brink of, the edge of the cliff or something. You decide
whatever it is that's not with you anymore or will not be with you anymore. That's the feeling of loneliness is creeping in, etc., etc. What is there a place of shelter that makes my connection with the eternal stronger, more vital, more vibrant? And then you invest whatever that is, whatever works for you to do that, you do that. You do more of that. It's not tucking that feeling under the rug. It's there it is. And the way that it's said in counseling, rock hits you. Life threw a rock at you, and it hit you, and it hurts. That's like the starting point. And then, what are you going to do about it? You can get angry, you can feel different feelings, or take the rock, the thing that hit you, and then you toss the rock in the air. The hurt is still there because it hit you. It hurts, but you're tossing and then you consider what are some of my options. So that's what I'm doing with you. Is okay. What are some of your options? And the temporary is temporary. Being your life situation is what your life situation is. You can't make it something else. It is what it is. It's acceptance of the reality of temporary. And then what are your options? So a very practical option is where is it that you have a sense of vitality, of connection with the eternal? And what are some of the channels that help you feel that connection with the eternal? And you do some of that. You're not pretending the rock isn't there. You're not pretending the feeling when the rock hit you isn't there. But you're investing in the eternal. And as you invest in the eternal, the hurt gets properly sized. The rock, and however that rock hit you, gets properly sized. It's still there, but you're going to the realm of the eternal by design. Then there may be something gnawing in the back of your mind. Oh, this feeling of lonely, but sits there, and you're giving your energy and attention to something else.
Sure, Maharaj. Thank you.
Maharaj, there's an online question.
Okay.
It's from Suchandra Prabhu. When there is no physical association of devotees whom I can open my heart, and mostly association is Guru's instruction and Srila Prabhupada's teachings, how do I overcome fear of loneliness?
Accept the reality of the situation and strengthen your relationship with Guru and Krishna, and pray to Guru and Krishna that some association that is meaningful and relatable will come your way. I know some people that were exactly in that space for quite some time, and sure enough, Krishna sent some association. They didn't know about those persons at that time when they were going through that feeling, and the association came, and they're very meaningful relationships. Some of them actually were proximate, some of them were remote, but relationships that took care of that social need, and without compromising their values. And Krishna's had a plan, and part of Krishna's plan was for that person to feel dependent upon Krishna more, rather than making their own arrangements. They attempted to make their own arrangements, and it wasn't working. And when they settled on Krishna will make some plan, they became peaceful, and Krishna made a plan. So, be patient and rely
invest in the relationship with Krishna more. I just got a very nice letter today from a teenager that said exactly this. In their own way, they shared some of the details, but they're feeling not just there's some distant entity named God, and they're supposed to feel something towards this distant entity named God, but they're feeling a connection, and they're not feeling alone. Their social circumstance hasn't changed a whole bunch, but their sense of not feeling alone has really changed a whole bunch. Nice devotee. So, something else?
Yeah, this next question is from Sucharita Mataji, and she says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, how do we know we are associating with the right kind of devotees without being judgmental about devotees?
Well, being discriminating and being judgmental are two different things. It's enjoined for those who are practicing devotional service that they're to see different grades of living entities. There's the supreme living entity, there's the devotees, there's the innocent, and there's the offenders to God. So, and we have different behaviors with those four categories. And then amongst those who are devotees, we're to evaluate, we're to see those who are higher, those who are peers, and those who are devotees but not as experienced as we are, and we're to make and then there's subdivisions of those. So that's a function of intelligence guided by scripture. Judgmental means I look down my nose at people that aren't up to what I expect them to be, and all those kinds of things. Like you're the judge, and the evidence is presented before you, and then you're going to judge them. That's not to be done. So don't judge. You can make discernments without judging, and then you behave accordingly to the different positions, more advanced peers, devotees but less advanced, different degrees of less advanced, different degrees of more elevated persons, and you relate accordingly. It's a natural function of discrimination, is how you have expressed yourself and carry yourself in relation to different persons. It's not doesn't require being judgmental. It just requires being discerning, and the guidelines for that discernment is scripture. Okay. Is that anything else online?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Maharaj.
Can I see if there's anything over here, you younger generation people?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. And I have actually a question about the desire.
Okay.
As it was mentioned, like when the desire arises and it get accomplished and we don't get satisfaction. I mean, it is not for a long time. We might have it for a fraction of time and then it just goes away. But the thing is, we are not satisfied when the desire arises and it's accomplished, and we are definitely not satisfied when it's not accomplished. We have that craving, it's just there, and desire just arises and we don't even want those desires, and it just arises in the mind. So how do I deal with those desires?
Specifically, how do you deal with unfulfilled desires?
Yeah, yes, of course. Even if it's fulfilled, then I don't have that satisfaction. So either ways, I'm in a loss when the desire arises. So how do I deal with those desires? And I don't want them to be there, and they are there.
Okay. That's a nice question. It's a very fundamental question.
that there's layers or levels, and you can say the really high level. That's like, wait a minute, that's too high for me. Directionally, try to direct desire towards the satisfaction of Krishna. If let's say there's a desire for, I want academic excellence in something or other, or whatever it is. I want a new iPhone, or whatever it is. There's a desire. I want to have a friendship with such and such person. There's a desire. So don't try to stab those desires till death. Try to see a way to connect those desires to satisfying Krishna. And the more you go down that satisfying Krishna path, it becomes easier and natural to go that path with everything. So that's the higher road. And then eventually there's just a oneness between your desires and Krishna's desire. But it may take a while to get there, but that's the spiritual position. And to spiritualize your present position, see how those things can be connected. Then we'll go down the ladder a little bit. And there's, got to use some Sanskrit phrases. Nishkam karma and sakam karma. You know the meaning? Nish means not or without, and sa means with. So do your activities that are according to a desire without attachment to the result. That's karma yoga. And nishkam karma yoga is, I still have I have a propensity. Because of my propensity, I have a desire. Maybe I want to be good at tennis, or maybe I want to be something. So some desire. And so let me do this where the fruit goes to Krishna. And there's sakam karma yoga is, I still have some desire for myself. I want this sense of achievement or accomplishment or something or other, or attainment or possessing something. So I give the result to Krishna, but I've achieved something. And then there's nishkam karma yoga, where I just recognize it's a higher step on the yoga ladder. There's duty that's meant for persons like me or for me. I'm in my stage in school, so let me make my best effort to do well in my academics, and the result is up to Krishna. But I'm doing the best that I can, and offering the result to Krishna, and whatever it is, it is. Because my investment is not being the enjoyer of the outcome, because if I get it, it's not fulfilling, and if I don't get it, it's worse than not fulfilling. But so that it's fulfilling is it's the connection with a particular stage of life. To do that which is natural for my particular stage of life and my particular personality, to do this thing. As I'm speaking, I'm thinking about a situation. Long ago, I was visiting somebody's home like this, and there was a little girl seated right here, right from where I was seated, and she was really attentive to everything. So I don't know what spurred me. When the class was over, I just turned to her and said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She was like 5, 6 years old. She said, "A pediatrician." And I thought, when I was 5, 6 years old, I didn't even know what that word meant. So I went, "Ooh." And I said, "You know what? I think you want to be a pediatrician that is doing everything for the satisfaction of Krishna." She said, "Yes, that's what I want."
So if it's an aspiration, that's a desire. And with the desire comes sacrifice and so many other things. But then there's the higher desire. So make your desire connected to the higher. And there's Nishkam Karma Yoga, but then there's Bhakti Yoga. It's not just, my life is meant for my body, my mind, my words. It's meant for fulfilling Krishna's desire. So I dovetail my desire with Krishna's desire, and then it's just Krishna's desire.
Thank you so much.
That's the higher stage. And, but that's something to aim for. And in between, you don't tuck it under the rug. With desire comes some uncertainty and sense of fulfillment or unfulfillment. And even getting it, it's not really the satisfaction that you thought it would be. Yeah. Statistics show suicide rate is highest amongst the most successful people because they climb the mountain, they get at the top of the mountain, and it didn't do for them what they thought it would do. So they have no reason to live anymore because that was what motivated them. So, so don't make that mistake. Okay?
Sure.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I want to know how to overcome fear of disease. Like
fear of?
Diseases. Like if you lose
disease.
one. Yeah.
Well, I'm not a professional, but this is my understanding in principle. There's one of the principles is acceptance. It might happen, it might not happen. And my being fearful of it might happen actually makes it more likely it's going to happen. Because I become weaker. My immune system becomes weaker, but just by that fear. So let me accept it's a possibility. Disease is a possibility. Then let me build up and the positive. Let me build up my immune system. Somebody asked Prabhupada. When I say Prabhupada, you know what that means, right? They asked Prabhupada, if one person gets a disease and another person gets a disease, is that because of karma? Prabhupada's answer, if someone's resistance is low, they'll contract the disease. If some resistance is strong, they won't contract the disease. So something that you can do as an antidote for fear of disease is strengthen your immune system. It might happen. But there's something you can do. You do positive. And then, a third is you take precaution. Like, we're wearing masks. And, it's not a guarantee. Whatever are the other things that people do, you do them because but if it's meant to be, there's nothing, you're going to do to stop it. Even if you go into an isolation chamber somewhere, you can still contract a disease. So you take precaution, you strengthen your immune system, and you don't obsess about it. You just acknowledge it's a possibility. You don't go into unnecessarily risky situations, but you live. So when you go into situations, when you're living, you take precaution. You're careful.
Thank you.
Then you right size that possibility. It's still a possibility because there are these four things. Disease is one of them. Birth and death and old age are the other three. So disease is going to happen because it's just part of having a temporary body. So let me take precaution. Recognize it's a reality. Don't obsess about it. Strengthen your immune system. There's lots of things. You learn what you can do to strengthen your immune system. Don't obsess about it because that weakens your immune system. But, do it in a balanced way. Okay. Anyone else in the room? Okay, you had something. Okay. So I think we're finished. Thank you very much. Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.